The sun was a brass coin flung into a sky of scorched parchment. It beat down on the desolate expanse, a relentless hammer on the cracked earth. Elias Carter rode a shadow against this blinding canvas, a man as stark and unforgiving as the land itself. His face, etched with lines as deep as the canyons, was a mask of bone and leather, its pallor unnatural in the harsh sunlight. His hands rested on the grips of twin revolvers, their metal as cold and alien as the moon. They were said to be of ghost iron, a substance whispered about in hushed tones, a metal that hummed with a life of its own. Some said it was forged in the heart of a dying star, others that it was a gift from the old ones. Carter knew only that they whispered to him, their cold touch a familiar comfort. He'd been riding for days, the horizon a constant mirage. The towns were ghost-like echoes of civilization, their structures bleached by the sun and haunted by the wind. People spoke of disappearances, of crops withering overnight, of strange lights dancing in the night sky. Tales of a cult, of a preacher promising salvation through sacrifice, had begun to seep into even the most isolated settlements. Carter didn't believe in salvation. He believed in lead and the cold certainty of death. But something about these stories had drawn him here, a whisper carried on the wind, a promise of a reckoning as old as time. As the sun began its descent, casting long, eerie shadows, Carter spurred his horse into a gallop. A town was coming into view, a cluster of wooden buildings clinging to a barren hill. It was called Redemption, a bitter irony in a land starved of mercy. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of ghost iron, hinting at the trouble that awaited him. The town looked like a mouthful of rotten teeth, and the air was thick with tension. The townsfolk eyed him warily as he rode in, their faces a patchwork of sweat and dust. The saloon's batwings creaked as they parted, revealing a room filled with the rancid stench of fear and desperation. The murmur of conversation hushed as he approached the bar, the only respite from the oppressive silence outside. The bartender was a man of few words, his eyes speaking volumes as they darted from the revolvers to the dusty hat brim that cast a shadow over Carter's face. "You're not from around here," he grunted, sliding a shot of amber liquid across the counter. Carter tossed back the whiskey, feeling the fire in his throat. "I'm looking for someone," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "A preacher. He's been leaving a trail of dead that's got folks spooked." The man's jaw tightened. "You're not the first. He's got a place out yonder, in the Badlands. They say he can do things that ain't natural." He pointed a gnarled finger to the east, where the horizon was stitched with jagged peaks. "But you do well to stay clear. He's got followers, and they ain't keen on strangers." The gunslinger's eyes narrowed. "I don't scare easy." The whiskey burned in his belly, mingling with the fire that fueled his purpose. He felt the guns on his hips whisper, urging him onward. Carter pushed away from the bar and stepped out into the twilight. The town was a mirage of dust and shadow, and the whispers grew louder in his mind, a siren's call leading him to the heart of darkness. His boots thudded rhythmically on the planked street as he made his way to the livery stable, the metal in his belt jingling like the chains of fate. The sun had fully disappeared now, replaced by a moon that hung in the sky like a silver dollar. The stars were distant and cold, uncaring witnesses to the events unfolding below. As he saddled his horse, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint sound of chanting. The preacher's lair was close, and with it, the promise of answers to questions he hadn't dared ask. The night was a canvas of shifting shadows as he rode into the wilderness. The whispers grew clearer, their urgency growing with every mile. He could almost make out words, a language not meant for human tongues. The ghost iron in his revolvers grew warm, a silent warning of the otherworldly peril that lay ahead. The trail grew steeper, the air colder, and the whispers grew louder. The ground trembled beneath his horse's hooves, a prelude to the chaos that was to come. As he crested a hill, the scene below unfolded like a nightmare. A ring of torches, a slew of voices raised in frenzied chant, and at the center, a figure clad in black, hands raised to the sky. Carter knew it was time to draw his guns and face the darkness that awaited. The whispers grew to a crescendo, a symphony of malice that seemed to resonate with every beat of his heart. He dismounted, the leather of his saddle creaking in protest, and approached the scene, the weight of his fate heavy on his shoulders. The preacher's eyes snapped open, glowing with an unearthly light. He turned to face the interloper, a smile of madness spreading across his face. "Welcome, Elias," he called out, his voice carrying on the wind. "You've arrived just in time for the reckoning." Carter's hand hovered over his holster, the ghost iron revolvers seemingly alive with anticipation. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the din of the chanting. The cultists fell silent, their eyes now fixed on the intruder. The preacher stepped forward, his robes fluttering around him like the wings of a great bat. "We seek to bring about a new age," he said, his voice echoing with the power of the ancient incantation. "An age where the weak are purged and the strong rule unchallenged." "And you think summoning whatever it is your calling will do that?" Carter sneered, his hand now firmly on the butt of his gun. "You're playing with fire, preacher. Fire that'll burn this world to ash." The preacher's smile grew wider. "Ah, but it's not fire we summon," he hissed. "It's something much, much older. Something that feeds on fear and despair." He gestured to the sky, where the stars had begun to bleed into the fabric of reality, leaving trails of shadowy smoke. "It's almost here. And with it, your salvation or your doom." Carter's gaze was unwavering. "I've seen enough doom to last a lifetime," he said, "and I've never been one to embrace it." With a flick of his wrist, he drew his revolvers, the ghost iron glinting in the moonlight. The cultists surged forward, a tide of madness and malice, their eyes burning with the same alien light as the preacher's. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and the metallic taste of magic. The first shot rang out, a sound that seemed to echo through eternity. The cultist in its path stumbled back, a gaping hole in his chest, his eyes wide with shock and pain. The others faltered, their confidence shaken. Carter moved with the grace of a predator, his guns speaking in a language of lead and thunder. Each shot found its mark, dropping another acolyte to the dust. The preacher's smile never wavered, his eyes never leaving the gunslinger's face as he continued to chant. The air grew colder, the ground trembled more violently, and the shadows grew darker, coalescing into a writhing mass at the center of the circle. A form began to take shape, something monstrous and ancient, born of the very fabric of nightmares. Carter's guns roared again and again, but the bullets passed through the shadowy creature without effect. It grew larger, its eyes burning with the light of dying stars. The whispers grew to a scream, filling his head with visions of destruction and despair. With a snarl, he holstered his revolvers and drew a knife from his boot. It was a simple tool, untouched by the whispers of ghost iron, but it had served him well in the past. He knew that sometimes the oldest weapons were the ones that could cut deepest. He charged the creature, his knife a silver streak in the night. The preacher's chant grew louder, his voice strident with ancient words and desperate pleas. The creature's eyes locked on Carter, a hunger that had never known satiation. The blade plunged into the shadowy flesh, and the world around them seemed to shudder. The preacher's chant turned to a scream as the creature recoiled, its form dissipating like smoke in the wind. The ground stilled, the whispers fell silent. Carter stood, panting, his knife dripping with ephemeral darkness. The preacher lay at his feet, the light gone from his eyes, his body nothing more than a desiccated husk. The ghost iron in his revolvers grew cold, the whispers silent once more. He looked around at the surviving cultists, who stared at him with a mix of terror and awe. "Get out of here," he said, his voice low and deadly. Take what's left of your preacher and don't come back." They fled, their torches casting wild shadows on the ground. As the last of them disappeared into the night, the bounty hunter sheathed his knife, the weight of his actions heavy in the silence. The whispers in his head had ceased, but the echo of their hunger remained, a chilling reminder of what had almost been unleashed. He knelt beside the preacher's body, searching for any clue to what he had been and what he had sought to bring forth. The man's pockets yielded a tattered map, stained with an unidentifiable substance that made Carter's skin crawl. It was drawn in a hand that was precise yet maddened, detailing a place deep in the heart of the Badlands. A place that seemed to beckon to him, whispering secrets of his own past. With a grim determination, he mounted his horse and set off into the night, the map fluttering in his hand like a grim talisman. The journey was treacherous, fraught with danger at every turn. The landscape grew more twisted and malevolent, the very earth seeming to reject the light of the moon. Days turned to nights, and nights to days. The passage of time marked only by the relentless march of his horse and the throb of the ghost iron at his side. He encountered more of the strange phenomena that had plagued the land. Rocks that sang with a mournful tune, rivers that boiled with an eerie glow, and once, a tree that whispered the names of the damned. Finally, the landscape opened up to reveal a chasm, a gaping maw in the earth that seemed to lead into the very bowels of the world. At its center was a towering structure, a monolith of black stone that pulsed with a sickly energy. This was the place the map had led him to, the place where the whispers grew the loudest. He dismounted, his horses breathing ragged and fearful. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the scent of ancient evil. He approached the monolith, the ghost iron in his revolvers growing warm once more. The whispers grew into a harshness, a symphony of pain and malice that seemed to resonate in his very bones. As he drew near, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman with eyes that shimmered like the metal of his guns. She was tall and lean, with a gaze that could cut through the darkest night. "Elias," she said, her voice a sultry purr. "We've been expecting you." The name on her lips sent a shiver down his spine. How did she know him? Who was she? The whispers grew louder, urging him to draw his weapons, but something held him back. A memory, a fragment of a past he had thought buried. Her smile was cold and knowing. "You've come a long way to find us," she continued, "but you're too late. The ceremony has already begun." Carter's hand hovered over his gun, the decision to shoot or to listen heavy in the air. The whispers grew to a fever pitch, demanding action, but he hesitated. This was a game he hadn't anticipated, a part of the story he hadn't seen in the whispers of his past. He took a step forward, the ghost iron singing a warning. "What do you want with me?" he demanded. Her smile widened, revealing teeth sharper than any he'd seen on a human. "We want what's inside you," she said. "The power that fuels those weapons, the power that could complete the summoning." The whispers grew silent, and the world around him stilled. The whispers had been a siren's call, luring him to this place for a purpose he hadn't yet understood. His hand tightened on his revolver, the metal warm and alive. "You're not getting it," he said, his voice a deadly promise. "Not today. Not ever." The woman's eyes narrowed, and she stepped aside, revealing a chamber carved into the very stone of the monolith. Within, a dark pool of energy churned, drawing in the life force of the land. And standing beside it, a man, a figure from his nightmares, the one who had first whispered the secrets of the ghost iron into his ear. The man looked up, his grin a twisted mockery of human emotion. "Elias," he rasped, his voice like a rusty nail on a chalkboard. "You've come to join us, I see." Carter's hand tightened around the grip of his ghost iron revolver. "You're the one behind this," he said, his voice tight with anger. "You're the one who's been whispering to me." The man stepped forward, his movements fluid and unnaturally graceful. "I am but a humble servant," he said. "But I knew you would come. The metal calls to you, does it not?" The whispers grew louder, a discord of voices clamoring for release. The woman's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "Kill him," she hissed, "and the power will be ours." Carter took a deep breath, his mind racing. He knew what he had to do, but the whispers were like a tempest in his skull, threatening to drown out all reason. He raised his gun, the metal seeming to pulse with a life of its own. The man in the chamber spread his arms wide. "Fire," he cackled. "Embrace your destiny, Elias. The power is yours for the taking." The gunslinger squeezed the trigger, the hammer falling with a clean, sharp click. The bullet streaked through the air, a silver comet in the gloom. It struck the man in the chest, but instead of blood, a burst of shadowy energy exploded outwards, knocking him back. The woman screamed, a sound that seemed to shake the very earth. The cultists emerged from the shadows, their eyes now fully alight with the madness of the ghost iron. They charged, their weapons raised, a tide of darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. Carter fired again and again, each shot a silent declaration of war. The cultists fell, one by one, their screams lost in the howling wind. The whispers grew stronger, urging him to give in, to let the power consume him. But he had faced darkness before, and he had never been one to back down. The woman lunged at him, her hands like talons, her eyes alight with malice. He sidestepped, his knife flashing in the moonlight. She stumbled, and he took the opening, driving the blade into her heart. The monolith trembled, the dark energy within the chamber pulsing wildly. The whispers grew to a deafening roar, and the ground opened up beneath the ghost iron. The woman's body was swallowed by the void, her screams echoing into the abyss. Carter stumbled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The whispers grew fainter, retreating into the shadows from which they came. He knew he had won, but at what cost? The man, his mentor, was dead, and the power of the ghost iron was still a mystery. He turned to leave, the chamber collapsing behind him. As he emerged into the night, the stars above seemed to whisper a warning. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The land was still cursed, and the whispers of the ghost iron would not be silenced so easily. With a heavy heart, he mounted his horse and rode into the night, the whispers of his past trailing behind him like a mournful echo. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but he knew one thing for sure. He would not rest until the darkness was banished from this world. The horizon beckoned, a line of hope in a sea of shadow. He had a name, a purpose, and a legacy to uphold. And with every beat of his horse's hooves, the whispers grew fainter, the call of the ghost iron less insistent. For now, he was free to choose his own destiny. But the whispers would return, and when they did, he would be ready. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories, give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.